themselves to try and beat it as well. So the premise behind this game is you're playing a chef whose food has all escaped, and you are trying to collect it and get it back to the cage so that you can presumably cook them all or something like that. As you can imagine, they don't want to be caught and cooked. What you saw right there was he took a warp door. So in some levels, there are special circumstances that if you beat the levels in just the right way, a warp door will allow you to skip some number of levels. So there were 6 levels for Switzerland. Each world is named after a country or a geographic location. And if you can collect all of the food within a certain number of seconds in that first level, it opens a warp door that lets you skip straight to the first stage of the next world. So he's now in Greece. He has to do the same thing over again. There's a little bit of nuance to how to play this game. So it's not just hunting for food. If that were the only thing, this game would be pretty easy. But this game's actually really difficult. This is an Amiga game at its heart. It really does not want you to finish the game under any circumstance. It's nearly unplayably difficult. And the reason for that is you start the game with 3 lives. And it's possible to get more. It's difficult to get more, but it's possible to get more. But for the next 48 levels, or however many levels are 36, a large number of levels, you now have to make sure you don't lose any lives. And you don't lose lives by running into the food. The food will just like temporarily stun you, and you'll drop some of the food. But there's these diseased... we have like special names for some of them. There's viruses and bacteria. And if they touch the food, they'll make the food diseased as well. So if you touch any of the diseases or you touch the diseased food, it'll kill you and take a life. And it's really easy for that to dogpile. It's very easy to find yourself surrounded by diseased foods who are all trying to hunt you down and kill you. But the end goal is to end up getting them all back to the cage. There's also a little bit of nuance as well with how do you get them back to the cage. So since running into the food can make you drop food items, if you're playing this game casually, you might think to yourself that you'd be better off collecting a piece of food and then taking it back to the cage, collecting another piece of food and taking it back to the cage. But if you ever put food in the cage and don't leave the stage immediately, it can sometimes trigger another character to spawn, who is named Le Chef Noir. And he looks just like you, except for he is in black robes, and he will let all of the food out of the cage. So he'll open like a side door of it, and all of the food will crawl out. You don't have to collect all the food in the stage. You have to collect a certain number of them, and for some stages it's pretty much all of the food, but for most of the stages it's only partially. So he just took another warp door right there to skip straight to, I think, yeah, just later in Greece. And then the next door will take him, I believe, to the West Indies. No, to Mexico. This is a very difficult game. If you ever play it casually, it's unlikely that you'll ever get out of the first world, and if you do, you probably won't make it too much further past then. This is one of those games of incremental progress, where as you play it more and more, you sort of figure out the best way to traverse each of the levels, and you make it slightly further each time. But it makes for a good speed run. Each of the foods have their own sort of AI. They're trying to avoid you to the best of their ability, and the different bacteria and viruses also have their own unique AI. So the bacteria, the purple guy that's jumping around, he is incredibly aggressive. If you're not anywhere near him, he will lunge at other foods to make them diseased, but if he's anywhere near you, he'll lunge at you at high speeds. The one that we call the virus is a little more subtle. He moves very slowly all around the stage, but if he touches you, instead of killing you, he just reverses your controls, but he also makes all the food diseased, and that kills you. So basically he makes it so you're not capable of moving properly, and then you're already surrounded by bad guys. So you see SmartBall right there got grabbed by the bacteria, and the bacteria took away one of his lives. This is a very tough game. It's one of those games it's really easy once you lose one life to lose 3 more to go along with it. This game's extremely punishing, and I don't know. It's a risky, difficult game, but SmartBall is definitely the best of all of the players. So he's trying to do a very difficult maneuver right there. If you jump on top of a food item and hit jump on pretty much the first frame that you land on them, you can get a high bounce off of a slightly higher point, and you can jump to a platform that you're not supposed to be able to get to there, which prevents you from having to go all the way around the stage to get out. And you can see on the side of the screen there, this yellow guy, he's the virus. He doesn't kill you when he touches you, he just reverses your controls, but he still infects all of the other food, so you've got this diseased food that's trying to kill you. You'll also have to sort of be careful in this game, because when the food is not diseased, so like you just picked up that potato, when the food's not diseased, you can't destroy it. You can stun it by jumping on top of it, but you can't kill it. But if the food's in a diseased state, you can actually kill it accidentally by jumping on top of it twice. And it's very easy to find yourself in a situation where you can't actually complete the level anymore. So it's expecting you to put, for instance, 8 pieces of food inside the cage to finish it off, but there's not 8 pieces remaining. And in those cases, the game actually gives you a button to go ahead and suicide and start the level over. Like I said, it's an Amiga game that doesn't expect you to actually be able to finish it. It's more of just an accident that this game's actually beatable. This game also doesn't really play very fair. Like for instance, you saw there's only really 2 ways to get up to the upper level of this stage, which you have to get up to. And that's just, there's 2 springs, one on either side of the stage. But the problem is that the spring launches you straight up into other foods if you're unlucky, and that will just stun you and knock you back down to the bottom. So this game's very interesting to try to speedrun, just due to the fact that you can really get screwed out of a good run by poor luck and poor level design. You notice that along the way he's also been picking up some weapons. You usually will pick up the flower packs in most stages. That's the most common weapon you'll find throughout the game. The flower packs are just a little projectile that you're able to toss. There's others available to you, and it's situational which ones are useful. There's a bottle of hot sauce you can pick up that allows you to breathe fire. There's a bomb that he picked up at the top of this stage, which just temporarily stuns everything on screen, which can be very useful. And then there's also... what was the last one I was thinking of? There's one more, and it'll come to me later, but I don't care right now. Trying to think, there's so much variety to this game. The stages are designed so uniquely, and so there's the virus there chasing down, and there was Les Chef Noir, if you saw him. He's going around trying to cause trouble. But SmartBall's out of there before he can do any damage. So this is the last stage of the West Indies before he heads into Mexico. SmartBall's having a little bit of trouble with lives. This game has taken a lot away, and he hasn't had quite the opportunity to recover them yet. There's a bonus round between worlds, so when you finish a world, there's a brief bonus round where it's possible to collect a small number of lives, but this game is merciless. It's absolutely merciless. Throughout the game, there's probably a handful of lives just sitting out in levels, maybe 3 or 4. A lot of them are in stages that you skip in any percent, so they're not in the levels with the warps. So there was a 1-up right there that he was actually able to grab. But most of the lives that you're going to get, you have to figure out how to work the bonus game. And the bonus game is not really obvious from the start anyway. So if he chose to spend some time here trying to get lives, it's non-obvious how the bonus game works. In general, you have to figure out how to manipulate score totals, and then there's one extra life you can get at the end, because the game will give you more points based on score. It's kind of an arcade premise. So he made his way as quickly as possible to the warp gate in that stage. A lot of the warps in this game kind of work on the premise that when you enter a stage, if you're playing the game in a way that makes sense, your first instinct is to start grabbing the net and grabbing a weapon and collecting some items. So what they do is they always put a warp gate that's time sensitive, like you have to get to it in the first 15 seconds or something, and they put it on the other side of the stage. So if you're playing it casually, you would never find that warp gate. You would be moving too slowly through the stage to make it there in time. But if you just make a beeline for it, it's fairly easy to grab. Like, most of these warps are not actually challenging to achieve or challenging to get to. There's only one warp, I would say, in this game that's actually quite difficult to get, and that's the one at the very end of China, which you'll see. He has so little time to make it there, and he's slowed down by pretty much everything in the game, so... He grabbed another life there. So his life total is actually in pretty good shape right now. Oh, is my commentary like way off? So in this stage here, he picks up an invincibility fairly early on in the stage. Definitely not necessary to beating the level. The level's beatable without it, but it's one of the reasons why you're probably going to have a hard time seeing Le Chef Pierre for this stage, just because of the fact that the game makes everything translucent for a lot of it, and it achieves that translucence by flickering at off on once per frame. And so if you're streaming at 30 frames per second, sometimes you can get unlucky and see every other frame. So this next stage is kind of designed in an interesting way. There's these two towers basically that contain all of the food. Going down the tower is pretty challenging. If you go down the middle, all of the platforms have springs on them that are trying to throw you back to the top. So if you want to get down to the bottom of the tower, that can be really challenging. A few alternatives are just taking the hidden teleporters to the insides of the towers, or if you're good, like SmartBall just did there, or I don't know how far off I am, but you're able to actually fall down the center and pretty cleverly avoid hitting any of the springs, which takes a lot of practice. And one of the big things in this game is the time limit. That's one of your biggest enemies, because if you really don't know what you're doing and you're just trying to find the food and capture it to the best of your ability, it's very easy for time to get away from you. You can see up at the top of the screen, he has a certain number of seconds. Once that timer runs out, you just lose a life and have to start the whole stage over. It's unlike losing a life usually, where you respawn in place. You actually lose all of your progress in that stage once time runs out, so it can be very challenging. So for that stage right there, he uses a trick that's actually relatively new since I stopped running this game. Um, Instead of going the long way around the stage and taking a series of teleporters to make it to where the warp gate is, he uses a high bounce um, off of the vegetable at the bottom of the screen in order to jump up to where the warp gate is. The stage that he's on right now is extremely difficult just because of the fact that you can't really ever know that the walls that you're looking at throughout this stage are solid walls or false walls, so you have to just sort of know what the layout is in advance. Okay, I've refreshed the commentary stream, so hopefully my delay is a little closer. This stage has some of its own challenges. The jumps across these little fans that are at the ends of platforms can be extremely challenging. They pull out from under you, but that's not the big problem. The big problem is because at the very end, the door that opens is all the way to the right, and you have to jump at the very tips of these fans in order to make it to the door in the right way. So that causes quite a bit of challenge if you're playing this for the first time. This stage right here is the last stage in China, at least for any percent. I think it's actually the last stage in China, though. And you have almost no time to lose. As a matter of fact, a lot of times you'll see people playing this, you'll take a death sometimes just to force your way through an enemy. But the amount of sort of wiggle room you have to make it to this warp door in time is so minuscule. So you saw there, he got hung up by a few enemies, and it was too much to make it to the warp door in time. So he's taking another crack at it. Okay, so he made it out. So hopefully SmartBall is not listening to me right now, because I'd like to say that there's going to be a lot of challenge here. France is probably the hardest part of the run. Everything's designed in such an incredibly unfair way, and he's entering this right now with no lives remaining. I know that he's capable of doing it. I mean, we've all had some no-death runs, but this game is... this game's really unfair. I think that's the nicest way to put it, is that it's not that it's just hard, it's that the game's actually designed in such a way to not be beatable. And I feel like I've said that a few times, but until you've played this yourself, you can't really fully understand what I mean by that. This game is not designed to be playable. This stage right here is all about climbing to the top of this tower, riding it up, and there's one very difficult jump at the end. So it's all going to be about just collecting the food in time, getting it down to the gate at the bottom, and then once he gets it down there, he still has to end the stage with an incredibly challenging jump. I think that it's not going to be a huge problem for him as time goes on. We've all gotten a lot better at this jump. It's an extremely small pixel window, but it is very challenging, and the amount of time it takes to get back to the top of the stage makes it so that it's very easy to time out on this stage. So you can find it very difficult just to finish within the allotted time if you're having trouble with it. So it's existed in other points in the run, actually, but this is going to be the only stage in any percent where SmartBall is going to grab the golden net. This is the only stage that it appears freely in any percent, to my knowledge. And the premise of it is that usually when you pick up something with your net, Le Chef Pierre is carrying that item with him, and he has to go back to the cage in order to drop them off. But if you'll notice, food just appeared in the cage without him having to go back, and that's because the golden net just instantly warps anything you catch into the cage, which does present a small problem because that can trigger Le Chef Noir to appear. But in general, this stage goes fast enough that's not a huge problem. Fortunately, he's going to be able to pick up an extra life at the end here. So he got the extra life, and he's heading into the next France stage. This stage is a series of tubes that go down. So the idea is that you are stuck in your tube, and you have to make sure that you land, like your tube lines up with the platforms that you want to go to. I don't know if it was known in advance. I only learned about it from SmartBall, but SmartBall seems to have figured out that you can actually, if you enter the tubes in a very specific way, like right on the ridge of them, you can actually move between multiple tubes, and he uses that to limit the number of times he has to go up and down these tubes. So it saves him a few cycles here. Alright, so SmartBall is trying to use an enemy to jump up to a higher platform there. Unfortunately, it did not play nice with him, so he's having to go the long way around. Not a huge time loss, but it does make things a little less convenient for him, because now he has to engage a lot more of these annoying enemies. His timing couldn't have been better, though. In the sense that there was an enemy that unconverted from disease back to normal at just the right time, so the amount of time that he ended up losing actually worked out for him okay. So this stage is another difficult one. There's a bit of tough platforming at the bottom, and more so than just that, there's also an issue with there's not enough food to get, except for if you go up to the top of that room full of balloons. The balloons are pretty important because you need to get up to the top area above them, and it's not obvious when you first enter there. As a matter of fact, I think that I've seen a handful of blind playthroughs of this game get stuck on this level because of the non-obvious nature. But the issue here is actually that he needs to jump specifically, I think it's on the red balloons. The red balloons are the only ones that are solid. The other color balloons aren't really there. No, it's the blue balloons. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad I said maybe, because I was not 100%. Which, if he gets up to the top, that gave him access to a teleporter that went to a room that gives him the last few pieces of food that he needed. And you saw what I meant before about tough platforming at the bottom. He has to jump on the very tiny platforms between the tubes. Platforming in this game is not very easy. It's pretty slippery, actually, and that is a big challenge. This stage that he's on now is another somewhat tricky one for your first playthrough. The stage itself isn't actually all that difficult, I don't think. Most of the food is congregated toward the center of the stage, which is not a problem. It's quite easy to get to them. But the main issue is that if you're not familiar with the level layout here, there's a lot of false walls throughout the game, or throughout the stage, and you have to know which walls you can walk through and which ones you can't. It's not obvious to look at how you can actually access the center tower where all the food is. And now for the last little trick. The game doesn't make it clear to you how to get back to the start. There's a little hidden platform over on the left, which you probably just now are seeing him take, that allows him to access the left-hand side of this stage, which allows him to get back to the exit door. This is, I believe, the last stage, unless I'm misremembering. This one is, much like the rest of France, riddled with false walls left and right, so you have to just know how to navigate this place. It's a complete mess. The game puts you at the other end from viruses and bacteria, so by the time you get halfway across the stage, all of the food is diseased. And here he goes. And there it is. There is Out to Lunch by SmartBall. Not to be confused with SmartBall by Out to Lunch. Probably one of the third or fourth greatest food-based platformers after Cool Spot and Panic Restaurant and... I'll give it number 3. Okay, number 3. I don't want to live in a world where soda is not food. Well, with that, thank you. Definitely follow SmartBall. He's a really, really talented speedrunner of a lot of really obscure fun games. So definitely follow the runner. Twitch.tv/SmartBall. He is an awesome dude. Check him out. Send him your love. Follow 1,000 times. Well, 1,001 times, because they'll cancel out. So, an odd number of times is what you want. Hey, Out to Lunch